Hi, um, I'm returning to doing videos, YouTube videos, after a year's sabbatical where I just took last year off to work through a whole bunch of trauma and psychological imbalances that came up at the beginning of the year. And one of my decisions was kind of like, well, I just want to bring an end to certain ways that I knew I'd been expressing myself in public forums. I just wanted to hit the reset button and stop. So I'm back, and what I intend to do right now with an upcoming series is to talk about all the different awakenings that I've been through, that I can consciously, that recall, and I'd like to talk about, that I've had through my life. And I really think, like, it's almost endless, the types of awakenings we can have, like, I know I've had so many, and they never stay sort of static either. Like, one particular awakening can grow into, it evolves over time, like, as you look back, and then you just see a little bit more to, what that lesson was, and the lesson becomes a bit bigger. And so anyway, I would like to share them, and just do it in the try and explore as many different perspectives on, the different awakenings that can happen. And also, I just think it's important to point out that we don't all have the same awakenings. We don't all need the same lessons. We're each on our own path. And so I'm just sharing, what I've experienced, how I've gone about this process, and you may relate to some of it, or you may go, oh, it's something I hadn't thought about before, or it may be just totally irrelevant. But it's, it doesn't matter what your response is. So 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 this awakening is, I'll just share with you a story, and it's back from when I was quite young. I was about 11 or 12 years old, and it's one of the first awakenings. And I'm not saying it was the first, because I know, of course there were probably many more and everything. So in a linear sense, it's kind of like one of the first key awakenings that, I consciously took on board on the spiritual path. And it was at the age of 12, which happens to be the point when karma and our awareness of our divine plans descends. As you'd be aware, like, adolescence is that point when everything starts to go kind of chaotic, and that's the reason why. Because all of a sudden, an adolescent is dealing with, their own personal karma and psychology, and it's just like this whole mess of everything just comes crashing in. So I don't believe it's just hormonal. I think the hormonal's an overlay of what goes on. I digress. So the story in this case, I was about, yeah, 11 or 12 years old, and my sister was just like this, yeah, classic teaser, loved to sort of set me up, as, all siblings do, with jokes and so on. And she told me that a girl who was in my year at school, year 6, that this girl's father had had a heart attack, and collapsed in the shower, and that she had tried to resuscitate him, but he died. And anyway, me being me at that time, I didn't believe my sister, and I I just thought she was trying to set me up with the story. Like, I just didn't believe her. So I went straight to this girl, the next day at school. I didn't really know this girl very well at all. Like, we weren't at all close. And I've just gone up and asked her straight out, and it was true. She said yes. And, next thing, this poor girl was just brokenhearted, you know, like the grief was just pouring out of her. And I I realized, I realized I really messed up. Like, I'd hurt this girl's feelings so badly. And, I felt awful, absolutely awful. And I'll add that I've talked about this in some other older videos, but like I'm on the spectrum, so very slightly. But yeah, so one of the major things I've had to work through is like learning how to read social cues and everything, and body language, sarcasm, have difficulty with that. So I've tended to sort of, put my foot in it, through time. But I've been learning, naturally, like we can all learn from this, and we can develop, what's missing in our psychology, develop skills. So that was a part of it. Like I just wasn't able to read, like, that's not a very sensitive thing to do. Like, don't take a chance on that. So, but anyway, so the point is, like, I did feel very bad about it, and I went home and, just totally went within, like processed a lot of, I can't recall if, what I processed. I just knew I felt bad, but also I know that, I looked within for what the lesson was, what do I need, what decision, what do I want to take from this. And I just remember sort of getting to this point of like turning to God. That was just my reference point, the only reference point I had for something higher than myself. And I said to God, I want to understand what suffering is, what abuse is, because I realized the reason why I couldn't empathize with, what it might feel like to have your father die like that was because I hadn't had that experience. I hadn't had any bad experiences. Life was just so easy for me, like, wrapped up in cotton wool. It was very, very easy. So, I asked, I said, I want to know what suffering is. I want to know what abuse is. And, the outer me sort of had this vision of like, I would be helping people to, help children and people, like, with their own experience of suffering, and I might be able to offer, teach them or help them in some way. And I did. I went on to, work with kids, and I continue to do what I can. But what I wasn't expecting from, when I said this is, I determined this is what I want for the course of my life, what I didn't expect was that I would actually experience, intense suffering and abuse. Personally, I experience quite a lot, like, maybe a couple of decades in so many different ways, and that'll come up in other videos. There's, absolutely no need to describe all of it here. So pretty much, the lesson from this was that, the experience of suffering, it can help us develop our compassion and our empathy, and an ability to, which can then be translated into, ways we can be of service to one another, how we can help one another. Because, someone who's, let's say, lost a child to suicide, they're going to be much better at counselling someone else who's been through that experience, because, it's a shared experience. So, our experiences of suffering, give us the opportunity to develop gifts that we can share with one another, what we've learned, how we've healed, and we can in turn learn from that other person. So that's my key first awakening, and and how suffering also can be turned into a gift. Yeah, that would just pretty much sum it up.